Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. If you love Timeless as much as I do, and you love brewing new decks, you've probably discovered that it's really tough to brew something in this format and have it actually stick, and actually impact the meta and have a good win rate. That's because this format is very high power level, and you have to respect a couple of things when you are building a deck. I was talking about this on Discord, and I left this comment that I put on screen. Go to pause the video and just read this. That is the main points I'm going to make in the video. You don't have to watch the whole thing, but if you want to stick around for 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about these things in depth and how this actually affects the meta, actually affects deck building, and how you can think about these things and try to crack the meta with your own decks. First of all, this is a show and tell format. Show and tell before Modern Horizons 3 was the only tier 1 deck. Of course, there were other decks that were very competitive, but the most competitive decks were decks that would prey on show and tell, that would contain show and tell. Things like the blue black control that had very few win conditions was a really great example of that. And nowadays, we have energy alongside show and tell as the other tier 1 deck, but really this format is still dominated by this combo deck that can just win on turn 3, sometimes even turn 2 with a Dark Ritual, but really consistently just win on turn 3. They cast a 3 mana spell, oops, I won. So every single deck in the format needs to have a plan against that. You need to be able to respect it. One of the ways you can do that is just by holding up a counter spell on that. That's how the blue black control deck did it before Modern Horizons 3, and that's how Jeskai and Dimir are doing it now. You can offer a really fast kill and kill them before that if you have a really degenerate deck. You can disrupt them with black discard spells. You can play a Vexing Bauble. You can play white spells like Deafening Silence that hate on them. Oftentimes you have to do multiple of these things because the show and tell deck is going to play Abrupt Decay, Force of Vigor to blow up your hate pieces. So now you find yourself also trying to squeeze Lavinia into your deck and squeeze more and more ways to hate their deck. And now you're playing Juggernaut Peddler to exile things from their hand. And there's this whole arms race to contain show and tell. And every single deck, including Mardu Energy, the other number one deck, is playing cards that contain show and tell. And Mardu Energy is Mardu, not Boros, just so that we can play cards like Juggernaut Peddler to help contain the threat. Second is the other deck that I mentioned, which is Energy. Energy can kill on turn 4 really consistently. I don't know if you guys have played good Energy players on ladder, but they will murder you with the correct hands. It is very possible for the deck to kill on turn 4. I've done it dozens of times at this point that I've gotten turn 4 kills. It's almost always off the back of a Johnny plus Goblin Bombardment. It's a literal turn 4 kill, not a turn 4 concession that this deck is capable of. In Magical Christmas Land, the deck is even capable of a turn 3. I was doing some math on Discord. Someone asked me, hey, is it possible for Energy to turn 3 without Ragavan? And my first thought was no, but then I did the math, and if you have a nut draw with Ocelot Pride and turn 1 that gets unblocked and multiple Amp Raptors hitting the perfect card, you could do 33 damage on turn 3 with Energy, which is wild, and not with a special version of Energy, just stock Energy getting lucky and hitting the perfect cards. Obviously, that's Christmas Land, but Energy is going to really consistently put you dead or close to dead on turn 4. So you need to be able to contain that deck by turn 4. So that means a board wipe on turn 3, or multiple removal spells coming through, flickering a Solitude, etc. So decks have to be constructed in a really specific way to be able to deal with both show and tell and this having very early wins. And these decks attack on completely different avenues as well. So that's already a tremendous strain on deck construction. Bullet point number 3 is really interesting. Every deck is trying to beat these two decks. So they're all come loaded with sideboard cards that beat them, and they also have the main deck interaction that beats those decks. A lot of people are playing Swords to Plowshares and Thoughtseizes in their main decks specifically to disrupt this sort of things. Energy is even playing Juggernaut Peddler in its main deck at this point just to have some exile removal, right? So if you're playing a deck like Shift and Tell, the Simic Shifting Woodlands deck that I really like, it's unfortunately getting caught in the crossfire of all of this stuff. People are just shooting all their show and tell hate cards at you and all of their decks that are pre-constructed to beat show and tell, and it really hurts this deck that is not as good as show and tell, and it really punches down on it and pushes it down, down, down in the meta. And the same thing happens to other creature decks that are really reliant on having creatures in play. They get hated out by all of the energy hate cards. Imagine like a creature deck with like Birthing Ritual that relies on, or like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, all these really powerful artifacts, enchantments, right? Well, Wrath of the Skies just cleans that up, and people play Wrath of the Skies because of energy. So it's really unfortunate that a lot of other creature decks and other combo decks ended up getting hated on by the same cards that hate on show and tell and hate on energy, and they end up getting put down. But then it comes this really cool arms race where we try to discover combo decks that don't necessarily get hated on by that stuff. Like we figure out the Jetstorm deck that doesn't die to the free spell hate of Show and Tell, and that you can always Necro for 19 cards against Show and Tell itself, and it's super fun. and it approaches the meta from a really specific angle. Or we have the new Gruul Shift and Tell deck, where you can win from the graveyard. And that gets around all sorts of interaction. Doesn't get around surgical extraction or graveyard hate, of course, but then that's why you have sneak attack in the deck, right? We're always thinking of new ways to get around these common sideboard cards. And a really good deck needs to be able to win through those. Fourth point, another sticking point. There are other decks in this format that already exist in this space where they don't get interacted with by the traditional energy or show and tell hate. And those are your control decks. So that's Dimir Tempo, Jeskai Control. And then there's also a couple combo decks that are still thriving in this space. Something like all the different Necropotence decks do pretty well in this space. So not only do you need to hit those other 3 bullet points that I just described, you have to beat show and tell, beat energy, and you need to not die to their sideboard cards. You also need to be good enough that you can beat all of these other secondary decks. And what really sucks for deck building right now, I'm not saying this to complain, by the way, I'm just saying why it makes it difficult. It's a fun challenge, is that a lot of those decks that are in that next tier are control decks. 2 out of the 3 of them are mana drain decks. And it's tough to build into when one deck's coming at you with mana drain and all the good black removal and black interaction, the other deck's coming at you with mana drain and all the good red white interaction and removal. So it's really tough to make something that actually sticks. And then even if you do make something that can get through all of that, there's other people casting Necropotence and just winning that way. And sometimes that deck's a little bit faster than yours. So let's talk about this cool Gruul deck, because I do think it hits 3 out of the 4 boxes. First of all, we made a combo deck that absolutely dumpsters on energy. I think I'm currently 8-1 or 9-1 versus energy. I checked my untapped stats. It's crazy. And the one loss we had against Mardu Energy was like in the first video I made with this, when it was literally my first couple of games with this deck. I was still learning it. We were still refining the deck. And like, I think I had some garbage mulligans there. Like, this deck really dumpsters energy just by playing 4 Fury in the main deck, and it interacts with them on an axis that they don't really interact with main deck. They can't remove the permanent sneak attack except with Static Prison. They only have 1 card that hits this main deck. They have nothing main deck that interacts with your graveyard. So you just fill up your graveyard and they can't touch it, which is fantastic. They do have a couple ways to like interact with your hand and interact with your board. Like they do play Juggernaut Peddlers, do play Static Prisons for this, but the Shifting Woodland plan is free. Like you just cast Malevolent Rumble, cast a 1 ring, take as much time as you need to put the combo together, and then eventually you annihilate or 10 them. And it's crazy. They can't interact with it. And then even after the sideboard, they do play surgicals, but they need to have the surgical and be able to deal with your sneak attack and just get around you buying turns with Ring while you're bringing in Brotherhood's End and Fury. And you also have 0 mana answers to cards like Blood Moon, Pithing Needle, and other lock pieces that they might bring in against you. So that's part of why this deck really interests me, is that it's really good against energy. Bullet point number 3 is a robust enough plan that you don't lose to the same disruptions as energy and show and tell. Yes, we don't lose to any of the energy disruption, and we don't lose to a lot of the show and tell disruption. It's generally counter spells, vexing bauble, free spell hate, that sort of stuff. No free spells in this deck. We play our own vexing baubles, which is awesome. We do not need to resolve a spell to win. We could Shifting Woodland copy things. Of course, our opponents can Pithing Needle that, but we have ways to fight back. We have Force of Vigor, we have a lot of draw effects to get through our deck. If the games go super late, we can always hardcast to things, of course. I've hardcast Inferno Titan a couple of times, and this stupid creature has won me games. I once even hardcast a Guard Pharaoh's Gift and won the game that way. It gets goofy. Though control decks can give you a run for your money. That's why I do have 2 Veil of Summer in the sideboard right now. And of course, we're still working on the deck, working on tweaking it. So I'm going to tweak it with those control decks in mind. And this is also the 4th bullet point that I kind of mentioned, is we do have to beat those control decks. I think we are really fine against those Necro decks. We do need to have the right kind of disruption against them. So that's where sideboard tech comes in. But as long as we can delay them off of their combo a little bit, we could just combo on turn 3, turn 4, and kill them, because they're not really interacting with us. Unfortunately, the one problem with this deck is the first bullet point, is that it does not disrupt show and tell really well. We can play 4 Vexing Baubles in our sideboard, and we can play some Disruptor Flutes in our sideboard, and we can play Surgical Extraction in our sideboard, and we can try to Force of Vigor Omniscience. But at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to be enough. We don't have any main deck ways to really beat them other than going faster with our combo. And yes, we can also do our combo on turn 3, but it's a lot harder for us to do our combo on turn 3 than them. We're slower than them on average. We're leaning on the 1 ring, to win us some longer games. They're not. So it's tough. And there's been a bit of an arms race that the brewers on Discord have been trying to figure it out and try to work on it. Like there was a really neat idea of how we can upgrade our vexing baubles by playing Possibility Storm as another lock piece. And Top Deck Karn, the original guy who made this deck, is saying that Vexing Bauble plus Possibility Storm is a lock for show and tell. And even just a Possibility Storm down by itself really disrupts their game plan. It prevents them from using Fav Wishes to get their win con, and it also prevents them from like using their sideboard cards, because if they cast a sideboard card, it just turns into another random card, which of course can work the other way. They can cast a random card and it turns into a sideboard card. And after we tested it a bunch, that ended up happening. Karn posted a clip where he jams opponent casts show and tell. They put omniscience to play. He puts possibility storm into play, and the opponent still wins just by casting random stupid cards. So that tech didn't get far enough, but we're trying, right? And if we can think of either a way to change the main deck or a crazy sideboard tech like Possibility Storm that can shift the matchup in our favor, then we have like a legitimate meta contender on our hands. And honestly, even without that, if we're ticking 3 out of the 4 boxes, I think that's enough to make this deck playable. I really like that this deck operates on an axis that traditionally doesn't get interacted with just the graveyard right now. Like no one's playing main Leyline of the Void. People are playing Surgical Extraction, if anything. But I've won games where people have extracted my God Pharaoh's Gift. You could still win those games because you have Sneak Attack as a win con, and then you also have just copying your creatures with Shifting Woodland, or copying the One Ring with Shifting Woodland to draw to hard casting your creatures. Yeah, there's one more deck that I did want to talk about here in the honor of Soren getting banned. I'm going to spend the 4 mythics I got from him on Saint Elenda. So this is another deck that I think operates in like that same space where, it's not quite the tier 1 or the tier 2 deck, but it does tick a lot of the boxes here. This is a deck I wanted to craft for a while, just I didn't have my 4 mythics for Saint Elenda here. But what I really like is it ticks the boxes, right? Ephemerate Solitude. We can absolutely clobber energy. I've been on the energy side of this matchup. I've beat this deck before, but it's always really, really tough. They really give you a run for your money. And they really do some things that are difficult for you to interact with. Like even if you have a Static Prison to hit the St. Elenda when you untap, St. Elenda still got like a stupid amount of value. You need to have a Swords on the spot, really, which is a really tough ask for a deck that's going to be just attacking you from so many different angles. This is also really good against Show and Tell. Why? Because we're a Grief Scam deck at our core. We're a Grief Scam deck that's also playing Juggernaut Peddler in the main deck, more Juggernaut Peddlers and Deafening Silences in the sideboard. Like, we are set up to win against Show and Tell, or at least slow them down enough that we can do our busted bullshit thing. And next bullet point, do we have a robust enough plan that we don't lose to the same sideboard cards as Energy and Show and Tell? The answer is yeah, for the most part. We don't lose to the energy hate. We do kind of be a little soft to counter spells, but that's every single combo deck. And we're a Dark Ritual deck, so often we can get under those counter spells. We could put the Necro on turn 1 or the Sorin on turn 1. And games where you have a Dark Ritual in your opener are games you're very, very likely to win against control. You're essentially doing a hard check against your control opponent and saying, subtlety, solitude, now, or you lose. The control deck is very happy to 2-for-1 themselves there because you are also spending a Dark Ritual to get ahead, right? They're not really even going down on card advantage. But if you, the mono black player, do Dark Ritual into a 3-drop on turn 1, you are off to the races. You do have a great matchup against those control decks. And I look back at my bullet points. Bullet point 3 and 4 often loop into each other because I talk about, how you have to beat the hate which is being played by those decks like Jeskai Control, Dimir Control. And that's what I like about this deck, is that it does attack from a different angle. It can do some really bullshit things like Dark Ritual into a Necro, draw 19 cards that can get absolutely under other decks. It has all of these free spells, so you can look at your opponent's hand for free, take the counter spell, and then do your BS thing. It's got ways to just like top deck a Reanimate, or top deck a Necro or Sorin or a DT to get itself out of crazy situations. This is just one version of the deck. This is a version I got from Def Chef on Discord. I saw somebody running a Mardu version on ladder that played Flage that looked really sick, that would do even better against energy. I don't know if you necessarily need Flage. I'm going to play this version first before I decide that. I saw a version with Deathrite Shaman too, playing green. So they were, 4-color mana base that was also playing Consuming Corruption. I think it was in a recent video. I remember saying on the video, don't build mana bases like that. But you know what? Sometimes some people are cooking because that guy was high ranked, I'm pretty sure. All right. I think that's going to conclude it for me. That was a solid 15 minutes of yap on exactly what it takes to build a deck that could possibly challenge the timeless meta. And we failed at this in the past. Like, for example, we spent a lot of time on Birthing Ritual decks on this channel in the past. And I had a lot of fun with Birthing Ritual. Birthing Ritual was really sweet. It was really fun to build some Lurrus Ritual decks. But really, what happened is it just died to the same sideboard cards as Energy, and it didn't have the same fast kill that Energy did. So it also just died to show and tell, even if you could Birthing Ritual into your hate pieces. So it's tough to brew in Timeless, but hopefully this video gave you some insights in how to do it. It also hopefully gave you some insights in exactly how to build your sideboards, because you need to build your sideboards to beat A, show and tell, B, Energy, C, beat the hate pieces that are going to commonly come in for your deck, which are influenced by the hate pieces that commonly come in for Energy and show and tell, and D, clean up any other miscellaneous decks in the format that might be giving you trouble, such as ways to fight back against control decks or ways to fight back against Necropotent style combo decks. All right, that's it for me, folks. Let me know if you like this video. This is fun to make. I love making little tutorials like this, so let me know if you like it. Share it with a friend. Thanks for watching.